think you can make a case that Ugas might be a harder fight for Pacquiao than Spence would be. Now, the reason for this is because the fact remains that a lot of people were expecting the Pacquiao vs Spence fight, and a lot of people were commending Pacquiao because he was going to actually fight Spence. Spence is obviously one of the most highly heralded figures in the welterweight division right now. The only person probably on the same level as him is probably Terence Crawford, but Terence Crawford is not seen as the man at welterweight the way Spence is. If you look at the Ring magazine, if you look at all of these publications, most of them have Spence as the top welterweight on the planet, and the reason is because he's got 2 of the premier belts, which is the IBF and the WBC. He's got a hell of a resume. I mean, he beat Danny Garcia in his last fight, he beat Porter, he's beaten Kell Brook, he's beaten several good fighters, and on top of that, he's been dominating all these good fighters. So the fact that Pacquiao was going to go in against him, a lot of people were looking at that fight as if Pacquiao fails against him, there's nothing much more to say, because Pacquiao was going against the grain. He's going up against a fighter that's bigger than he is, taller than he is, has a bigger reach, is stronger, and is younger as well by a couple of years. So Pacquiao losing to Spence is not that disgraceful, but Pacquiao actually losing to Ugas is might be seen as Pacquiao being past it to some extent, because the fact remains that Ugas is very awkward stylistically to the opponent that he was preparing for, which is Spence. I mean, if you look at Ugas is a fighter that's a very slick Cuban amateur. If you look at him in terms of his amateur credentials, I mean, he was in the Olympics, he won a bronze medal. I mean, obviously Errol Spence went to the Olympics as well, but it's a different type of level in terms of the opposition is different, the challenge is different. But Spence is not seen. Spence is seen as the dominant figure at welterweight at this point in time. He's seen as this generation's top welterweight. Obviously, you do have other fighters out there like the Keith Thurmans, but Keith Thurman's obviously lost to Pacquiao. So the other top fighter is Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. And for some reason, Terence Crawford isn't given as much credit as Errol Spence is, despite the fact that he's unified the division and he's done so much great things. But if you look at Ugas is like the dark horse of the division. He's the figure in the division that just doesn't get as much credit as he deserves, and because of that, Pacquiao might be in a situation where he's not going to get that much credit for fighting Ugas as he would have gotten if he would have fought Spence. So in that circumstance, Pacquiao might be seen, if he was to lose to Ugas, and it could happen because Ugas is a top fighter. A lot of people might say that might be less willing to give him a pass on that compared to if he was to lose to Spence. So that's my opinion on this particular thing. You can make a case that Ugas is more of a harder fight for Pacquiao in that sense, because he's high risk and low reward. I mean, if he was to beat Ugas, he would win a WBA title. He would get a lot of credit for that, but it wouldn't be as big as him challenging Spence. So in some sense, you can say that a fight against Ugas would be... It's a good fight, don't get it twisted. Like, he's going up against a top welterweight in Ugas, but he won't get as much credit for beating Ugas as he would have gotten for beating Spence. And on top of that, if he was to lose to Ugas, a lot of people would just say that he's just past it, he's not as good as he once was. But if he was to lose to Errol Spence, not many people would say that, because of the fact that Errol Spence is, like I said, younger. He's got more energy because he's younger, he's bigger, he's stronger, he's probably got a larger reach, and he's taller as well. So he's going up against all of these different variables, which would have made the fight harder for him. So in my opinion, in terms of this particular fight, I think it's fair to say that Pacquiao is going up against a different type. It's a different type of challenge. It's not as frightening as going up against prime Spence, but it's still something big. So in my opinion, he won't get as much credit for losing to for winning against Ugas, and for basically winning against Ugas, he's not going to get as much credit as he would have got if he would have beaten Spence, if he would have won against Spence. And on top of that, like, if he would have lost to Ugas, he's not going to get as much sympathy as he would have if he would have lost to Spence. So from that perspective, you can argue that he's going up against a bigger challenge in fighting Ugas than if he would have fought Spence. And on top of that, Ugas is a very good fighter. I mean, he's a dark horse of the division. A lot of people thought that he beat Sean Porter. A lot of people thought that he was in a position where he could have won against several top fighters. And he's a beast in his own right. Don't get it twisted. I mean, he's not getting the credit that he deserves, but he is a beast in his own right. So, in my opinion, both fighters are challenging in their own way. Obviously, going up against a prime powerhouse like Spence is a lot. But I'll be honest with you. I feel like in some ways, fighting Ugas is more of a challenge than fighting Spence, because Spence is an absolute powerhouse, but he will get more credit for that win if he was to win. And even if he was to lose, I mean, who's expecting him to beat a fighter in his prime like Spence? But Ugas, because he's underrated and is a dark horse, he's not going to get as much credit for that. But anyway, that's my thoughts on that. Tell me your thoughts. What do you think about this particular fight? Are you looking forward to it? Do you think it's worth the pay-per-view price, the fact that it's on pay-per-view? And in your opinion, have you been hearing that Pacquiao wants to actually retire after this fight? What's your opinion on that? If he was to retire, I'll be honest with you, I think Pacquiao is probably the greatest fighter that I've ever seen in my own lifetime. When obviously when people talk about yesteryear, they talk about the Mike Tysons, they talk about obviously they talk about Muhammad Ali, but I feel I'm grateful to say that Pacquiao was part of my era. I mean, just to say that is a good thing. So yeah, in my opinion, this is a top fight for both men, and I'm looking forward to it. And I think in some aspects, Ugas is more of an awkward fight for Pacquiao than Spence is. Not just because of what I mentioned, because of the risk reward, but also the fact that Ugas is going to be more awkward than I think Spence. Spence is a fight that's going to be in your face. He's a pressure fighter. He's got good boxing fundamentals, but fundamentally he is a pressure fighter. He's not a fighter that is going to run away from you. He's a fighter that's going to come straight at you. That's just who he is. That's his nature as a fighter, to actually come at you and seek and destroy your body with body punches. That's just who he is as a fighter. With Ugas a boxer puncher, and he can be awkward and he can move as well. And he's got good boxing fundamentals on top of that. So, in my opinion, you can make a case that Pacquiao is probably in a harder fight against Ugas than he is against if he was to fight Spence to some extent. Obviously, I don't think Ugas is as physically intimidating as fighting a prime Spence is, but in other aspects he's more awkward as well. So yeah, that's my opinion. Tell me your opinion. What do you think about this fight? Are you looking forward to it, or is it a fight that you think is a poor substitute for the Pacquiao versus Spence fight? That's all I got to say about the matter. Like and subscribe to the channel. I've got a lot more content coming your way. Peace out.